Hey everyone, I'm Erin Sorensen, Deputy Editor for Hail Varsity, and I am joined by Brandon Vogel, the Managing Editor of Hail Varsity, and we are going to talk about Nebraska Northwestern. I don't really know what else to say or how to intro this. That's about all I got. So I guess, Brandon, I'm going to throw it to you. You said you had some numbers. Let's start there.
Oh boy, do I. So a 21-13 Northwestern win, which we all know at this point. Scott Frost drops to, I think, 9-19 as the head coach at Nebraska over 2 seasons plus 2 games. It's another game that on the stat sheet looks like Nebraska should have won. On the field, they did not. And that's kind of becoming a pretty troubling trait so far for this era. First downs in this game, Nebraska had 28, Northwestern had 14. You should win when that happens. Total yards, and this is why total yards is always kind of a nonsense stat, but 442 to 317 for Northwestern. I'm sure you'll see that a lot on a yards per play basis. It was actually 5.0 to 4.9, so basically a wash. Rushing yards, Nebraska became the second Big Ten team to rush for 200 plus yards against Northwestern and lose since 2017. The other team was 2018 Nebraska. Again,
Totally fine.
These things just keep piling up. Nebraska threw the ball 45 times, which I did not expect in this game. You know, some of that was having two pretty long drives late in the game where they were trying to make up 8 points, but still. They did hold Peyton Ramsey to 59% completion, which is low for him. He was at 70% coming in. Third downs. I wrote about this. I talked about it on the podcast, IUD Preview podcast. Subscribe 5 stars right now. 7 of 16 for Northwestern, which is better than Nebraska. Nebraska was only 4 of 16, but 7 of 16 was actually below their season average. So I think Nebraska did enough to win in a lot of cases here. But the big one is, and we'll be talking about this for the next 2-3 days, was Nebraska had 8 scoring chances, which I count as any trip inside the 40-yard line, and had 13 points. Scott Frost was asked about it. First question out of the gate, talked about it, and here we are. So my question to you, Erin.
We are.
All of that, knowing all of that, why does this keep happening? Simple question. Just wrap it up for us.
I mean, some people on Twitter have gone down the conspiracy theory path where it's almost like the Chicago Cubs, where there's clearly something that has cursed Nebraska. I think for myself, the one thing that just sort of summed everything up was that drive of Luke McCaffrey's where everything felt like it was going pretty well. And then of all things, he throws the ball into the back of an offensive lineman's helmet. It bounces off and it's intercepted. I just looked at that moment as sort of that has been the story of Nebraska for so many years. Why did that of all things have to happen? And I'm sort of at a loss for why. We have run through, and for the record, for anyone who's watching this, whether you're leaving comments on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, we see them, and I hear you, because I know one of the things that is so frustrating is why does this keep happening, and why does it feel like the same story no matter who is coaching? It feels like we've heard this story with Bo Pelini. We've heard this story with Mike Riley. We now hear the story with Scott Frost. Wasn't it supposed to be different? And, we talk about the culture needing to be different. And I'm not going to, I don't want to oversimplify this. It is more significant than this, than just this piece, but I have talked about this quite a bit. Nebraska simply does not know how to win anymore. And I cannot say how that is a big factor. When you have a team that just doesn't know how to finish drives, doesn't know how to finish a game. I always go back to that Colorado matchup in 2019 where there was no reason Nebraska should have lost that one and then did. This team has an issue with finishing. This team, and it's not even anymore finishing games. It's finishing drives. It's finishing what they're doing right in that moment. So I guess the question then for me becomes, why is this team where is that disconnect where this team cannot kind of just follow through with what they need to get to the end goal? because like you said, the numbers suggest they were better than they were, and yet the score still put them on the side that they don't want to be on. Why?
Yeah, it's a massive question, and honestly, I don't even know how much more I can write about it, because it feels like every third or fourth game, like that's the takeaway. And I'm hesitant to do that. You know, some games kind of slap you in the face with it, and this was another one where you're like, if you get out of your own way, things are much different. And I've written that in the Pelini era, which is when I started covering Nebraska. I wrote it in the Riley era, and here we are again. It's almost like Nebraska, each time out, particularly in conference play, has to beat the team it's playing and beat the game of football itself, which I think is different than saying it has to stop beating itself, because mistakes happen. Like every football game you'll watch today, and plenty you may not be as emotionally invested in as Nebraska, as just a Nebraska football fan, like you don't notice the mistakes as much. So you got to live with a little bit of that, but they're in a conference where teams like Northwestern, certainly Iowa and Wisconsin, really put the test to you to, hey, respect the game. You have to like follow the rules and do what it does. And I don't mean like the literal rules. I mean kind of more a general sense. And Northwestern's just really good at it. And Nebraska hasn't been really since it joined the conference.
No, and I think that I think my dog agrees with you, because when you started speaking on that, she got up and started walking around. So if anyone hears like it sounds like tap dancing in the background, it's just the agreement of Scout. Yeah, I hate, at some point there has to be some reckoning. And you know, I appreciate Scott Frost saying, this is on me. I take this on myself. I think that's important, but I just don't think it's as simple anymore as who. So one of the questions that I've seen a lot on Twitter, mostly since the game ended, was Luke McCaffrey should be the starting quarterback. Maybe. Frost has said he has two quarterbacks he feels good about. He said, you know, Adrian was put in a tough spot. I will say for both individuals, at least in the first half for Adrian, he did not play well. However, he also had a lot of people around him also not playing well. He's without his starting center. Matt Farniak was the starting center for this game. I was surprised by that it wasn't Matt's brother, Will, knowing that he has worked with Adrian in the past. Frost made the comment that their choice, the reason they decided to go with Matt was because of the experience. He's the coach, they know what they're doing, but I still kind of felt like if there's a rapport between Adrian and Will, maybe that makes more sense. We did see some bad snaps, especially to start the game, a couple of really high snaps. That does throw the timing off with your quarterback. So I'm hesitant to completely say Adrian is done. He is no longer the guy, but I would definitely say if you're Frost, you're looking at it a little bit more closely, because Luke did show a lot. I think the thing we've talked about is, can Luke throw efficiently? And he showed that he could against Northwestern, obviously with a couple of mistakes here and there. But I'm not sure what you make of that.
Yeah, you know, Nebraska was completing some passes on some balls that didn't look great from either guy, just coming out of the hand. But, you know, if you can scheme guys that open, who cares how tight the spiral is, I guess, particularly in a game like this, it's close into the fourth quarter. You know, Adrian wasn't playing well early on, but he wasn't the reason like Nebraska was struggling offensively. And I mean, struggling to score points and finish drives, as you mentioned. Like it was moving the ball plenty well. Its success rate was almost 10 points higher than what Northwestern came into the game allowing. So again, we see that a lot. Nebraska can move the ball on anybody. It just becomes, can you maximize those opportunities you create for yourself? And today was, you know, as bad a struggle as I can remember from a Nebraska team under Frost. So,
and that was the case with both Adrian and Luke. Now, Luke was moving the ball, I would say, a little bit more efficiently. One question I do have is I'm a little bit confused as to some of Adrian looked either like he was injured or like something was going on, because his throwing motion was really off against Northwestern. And I'm not going to make any assumption. Please, if you're watching this, do not take that as like insider information. We just were all discussing the fact that his throwing motion looked a little bit off. So I would be curious as to why. But I mean, even with that considered, he was moving the ball at times. Luke was moving the ball, but they just couldn't get it done. They couldn't get the ball into the end zone, and that's what matters. Nebraska's red zone, the second Nebraska goes into the red zone, it's like it falls apart.
Yeah. I mean, I think the simplest way to look at it, but the way it actually unfolded on the field in terms of how well Martinez was playing, is that he didn't come out until he threw that interception. And it's a really inexcusable interception. Like, even to Austin Allen, who's 6'8", on a corner fade, like, yeah, you'll play that matchup when you're down inside the 20, but from the 25-yard line, after you've kind of gone through your progression and nothing's there and your feet aren't where you'd want them to be, like, you can't hang a ball like that up over the middle. And that was enough for Nebraska to make the switch to McCaffrey, who looked like the individual athlete we all knew him to be. He's a dynamic player. At that point, Northwestern had 2 long fields to work with. Clock was in their favor. I'm not saying they, weren't trying to stop Nebraska or win full on prevent mode, but like, they're willing to live with the 15-yard run, which McCaffrey had 2 of, I believe, on that last drive. And it worked. I mean, that's why you're willing to live with it, because they've still got to get in the end zone and then convert a 2-point conversion. It was interesting, those last drives, just how involved the young players were. So you had Luke McCaffrey with 2 completions to Xavier Betts. Marcus Fleming, I don't have the game book in front of me, but he might have ended up as Nebraska's leading receiver. So there's that. And I'll be writing about this post game. I think the offense might be at a little bit of a crisis point, because it's more talented than Northwestern on paper, and it's more talented than most teams in the West on paper, but it's not so talented that it can we just throw the ball as often as we can to Wan'Dale Robinson and he'll win one-on-one. And he will win a lot of matchups one-on-one, but Nebraska can't get there often enough. And in my opinion, right now, they're really struggling to have pep plays. And I think that's why they struggled so much down in scoring territory. Is you've got, a first down at the 4-yard line or the 3-yard line, whatever it is, after a pass interference penalty, and they can't just run it to get it in there. That's a problem, and it's going to take a while to figure out. Let's flip to the other side quick. I guess defensively, what did you think from Nebraska?
I think what you said, though, about the offense almost fits with the defense as well. They're too talented to have this be the outcome. I feel like I've said this for so many years, and this has gone beyond any coaching staff. The defense has to do a better job of wrapping up and tackling. I don't fully understand why that's just not happening, but that's also how you're going to end up in situations where you get targeting calls, because you're not wrapping up and tackling. You're just throwing your shoulder at people. One, it's an ineffective way of tackling, and 2, it's going to get you in trouble here and there. So I think, a little more disappointed than I wanted to be watching Deontay Williams, for example, throw his shoulder into guys and not actually put his arms around them to tackle. And then they evade him, they get away, and then it's done. That is something that should not be happening, but it's happened for so long with Nebraska that it's either so ingrained in this program that like any coach is just struggling to overcome it, or I don't know how to explain it at this point, because I actually thought the defense had a pretty okay game. I thought the defense kept Nebraska's offense in this much longer, and it probably could have been much worse. But again, you see those moments where you're like, come on, Deontay, we've been told that you're so much better than this. Why are there so many missed tackles? I think the defense shows a lot of promise, but it's the exact same thing where it's like, for as much talent and promise is there, why is it not? It just feels like there's another step that needs to be taken, and it's just constantly sitting, waiting for that next step.
Yeah, the tackling was really a big disappointment to me out of this game, particularly because I thought Nebraska tackled pretty well. And Scott Frost said as much after the Ohio State game. it was a big problem in 2019. So that opener, even with the score, what it was against the Buckeyes, represented some progress to me. And then today it got a little bit loose. You know, bottom line, in my opinion, the defense played well enough to win. It held Northwestern 10 points below its season success rate average, which means it was keeping it off schedule, which I talked about pregame, like how they did on third down. I think they did well enough. You would have liked maybe one or two more stops, but well enough to stay in that game. The one like real problem was, so we talked about Nebraska's 8 scoring opportunities. Northwestern only had 3, and they scored a touchdown on all 3. So, you know, a below average offense on 8 scoring opportunities should net about 24 points. So even with Nebraska not getting stops in the red zone or out to the 40-yard line, which is where I actually start, still with just an average performance offensively down there, you're walking out of here with a win. It's a much different feel, I think, going into next week with Penn State, who's playing Maryland right now. I haven't seen a score from that, but don't get caught up in Penn State being 0-2. Like, that team is good, and Nebraska is going to have a big challenge. I think, you know, the players talked about it post-game. Like, this was a pretty hurt locker room afterwards, and we're going to have to see how they respond.
The word that Luke Reimer used was somber, which I found really interesting. And this Nebraska team needs to find a win for so many reasons, because it will boost the morale. It will get everybody. I mean, morale is not everything, but momentum and morale do help. So this team desperately needs something. It kind of takes me back to Scott Frost's first season, where every single week it was like, if they could just get the win, if they could just get a win. And not to say that a win obviously changes everything, because it didn't in that first season, but it does help. And I know for fans, it's a whole heck of a lot more fun on a Saturday to be done with your day with a win than a loss. So for the fans that are like, what next? We don't know. The good news is we will continue to have coverage on hailvarsity.com. Wherever you're watching this, like I said, if it's on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, we are reading your comments, and we factor that into the things that we're covering. Heck, you might even see one of your comments make it in the mailbag. That has happened plenty of times before. So we do appreciate the conversation. Wish we had more clear-cut answers, but we will be back with more answers from Scott Frost and players on Monday. That is when they're scheduled next to meet with the media. So I guess as we shift away from Northwestern and into Penn State, we'll just see, I guess, where their mentality goes in a couple of days.
Yeah, it'll be another interesting Monday. I think most Nebraska fans would be happy to have boring Mondays where you can talk about, yeah, we went out there and won 42-10, and things looked about like everyone wants them to look. But today was yet further proof Nebraska's not quite there yet. So we'll be unpacking all of that, like you said, on hailvarsity.com, the Hail Varsity Podcast Network, just growing and growing. I was already trading text with Jay Moore. I know he's got some stuff he's pretty anxious to look into. So check out the More To It podcast on Monday for sure. And yeah, back to the drawing board.
Back to the drawing board. We do appreciate you tuning in, as always, for joining us. Plenty more to come. Don't forget, we're all in this together. And hey, football is better than no football, right? Right?
Yeah, still, I think.
All right. Thanks, everyone. We will talk to you later.